Good morning, I'm Adam Sexton. Housing has been a top priority issue at the State House for some time now. As the policy discussion has evolved, it is dividing along lines that are sometimes partisan and sometimes between local and state. But the bottom line is that consensus over how best to address what many Granite Staters consider a #1 problem is fracturing a little bit. Here this morning to discuss are two of the top leaders on this issue, Senator Rebecca Perkins Squoka, a Democrat from Portsmouth, who's also the Senate Democratic leader, and Representative Joe Alexander from Goffstown. Geez, I wanted to say your committee name as well. You're the chairman of the House Housing Committee, a very important committee in the House. So thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
I want to start talking about a bill that has kind of everybody talking right now, which is one that was just in your committee, Representative Alexander, to repeal the Housing Champions program that you both worked on together, using state dollars to incentivize more pro-development policy in local communities. There's obviously an effort now to roll this back, and Representative Alexander, you had been a supporter, but now you support repeal. So explain why you changed your mind.
Well, I think what we need to talk about, Adam, is the fact that this was a great policy during the COVID era. We had a number of extra funding mechanisms in the state budget due to some federal dollars that were coming down from the federal government, and we used that money effectively and in targeted approaches. So Housing Champions at the time was a great COVID era policy, but I think at this point both chambers chose not to fund some housing priorities. So Housing Champions was one of those things that we just didn't fund in July, and it just seems like an extra government program that we don't need. On top of that, if you look at the administrative cost of running the program, it does seem to be pretty steep, and I think when we are in a tight budget year, we need to be responsible and targeted with our financial investments.
Senator Perkins Squoka, you were also sort of a founding mother on this program as well. What's your perspective on this?
Yeah, well, Adam, Housing Champions works. It's a proven model, and in today's housing crisis, I don't think it's any time to take a tool out of the toolbox or to take our foot off the gas. What we know about Housing Champions is that it's responsible for 45% of new housing starts in 2025. Those all occurred in Housing Champion communities. And so for a mere $5 million out of our giant budget, we've been able to make a significant difference in the #1 issue that Granite Staters are asking for. So there are some other priorities in the budget that have been funded. For example, $120 million to a school voucher system that the voters are not asking for, but $5 million for a housing program to address the #1 issue seems like a good investment.
Representative Alexander, what's your response to that? In particular, the idea, is this program working in your opinion?
Well, I think it worked back during the COVID era. I think we had that extra money to spend. This is where we disagree with the senator. This COVID voucher system is widely popular and widely successful. It actually is capped out at the number of students right now. So there are families that are working really hard to get out of a trapped public school system. So we're providing options for them. But I would say additionally, the legislature chose to make targeted investments in investing in housing and handouts to developers and subsidies to towns that will just drive up your property taxes. They're just not reasonable investments. So we chose not to do that.
One extra question for you, Representative Alexander. On the fiscal note, it says there's still $2.6 million in this program that is obligated but hasn't been sent out yet. Is it your understanding that that money would be clawed back to the state?
So a number of those investments have already been sent out to towns. I know I spoke to somebody in Salem today. A lot of towns have already received these fundings. So I would think that at the time, if they're obligated, they'd be sent out, they'd be invested out, but the program would not continue as is.
And just to correct the record a little bit, Adam, if I could, I think to explain the Housing Champions program is it's grants to municipalities that are going to lower property taxes in exchange for housing-friendly actions. So we know this is the #1 issue across the state. The state needs to lead in helping to produce more housing stock. It's what our small businesses are asking for, so there can be more workforce. If you talk to Granite Staters, they want us to see solutions. And between the Housing Champions program, which was defunded, and the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which was also defunded in Governor Ayotte's budget, those have produced over 6,200 housing units in the past 2 years. So these are programs that work. They're what the voters are asking for. We need to stick with them.
One of the issues Republicans raised, though, on this bill in committee was that there is no statutory requirement in the Housing Champions program for tracking outcomes. Do you think there is enough data to support continuing this?
In fact, BEA just had a webinar on this about a week and a half, and they are tracking outcomes. Every dollar that's been spent can be seen, and again, those dollars are showing results. So I'm incredibly proud of the work we've done on this. I came here to make a difference, and Housing Champions is doing that. We've seen 1,500 new units result from that program alone. So, the program's been set up. It was a bipartisan program I worked on with former Senator Senate President Jeb Bradley. It's been staffed, it's been funded, it's awarded two rounds of grants to 28 towns and cities. It's working. It's not time to pull the plug for partisan reasons.
So, well, I wouldn't even say it's partisan reasons. I would say I haven't found a single government program that state has invested to towns in which I've seen lower property taxes. For instance, all the Meals on Rooms tax distribution we're sending back to property to cities and towns, we're not seeing those property taxes go down. In fact, we're seeing those skyrocket. So I know we had conversations about property tax caps and a number of other issues, but I haven't seen a single state program in which we've distributed money to a town and they've lowered property taxes. So in that way, I just don't think it's a very effective use of our tools if these government programs are driving up property taxes.
So the debate over HB 1196 will continue. This begs the question, though, Representative Alexander, what should the state be doing on housing?
Well, we've done a number of things this year. I called it hot housing summer. Like, we passed a number of bills, including residential and commercial zones by right. We have the ability to construct those in-law apartments on single-family lots. Those are very important initiatives that we finally passed, and we're starting to see results. You saw the New Hampshire Journal came out with an article that we're building more homes than we have in the past 20 years. So the goals that we're having are not investment goals, they're targeted changes in policy. On top of that, we've also had the governor has made a lot of strides to try to reduce the permitting process. So we've condensed the permitting process from 4 state departments to 2 state departments. So you have almost a one-stop shop when you're going in to get your state permitting for different housing units. So we're doing a lot of things on cutting the government red tape that will also help build more houses.
From the Senate side, what kind of bipartisan action do you think you can get over to the House?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to note that, the state should be doing everything that it can. That does not mean in every case that there needs to be investment involved, but we should still be working to try to fix this problem. It's the #1 economic constraint on our economy. Businesses can't grow without workforce. We need childcare, we need other infrastructure, but like sewer and water. And so Representative Alexander talks about how there have started to be an increase in housing supply. That is in part due to programs like Housing Champions, which again was responsible for 45% of new housing starts in the last 2 years. So I think while we did see some regulatory reform happen over the last couple of years, that's going to take time, whereas programs like Housing Champions are immediate and they'll produce results quickly. I think it's important as we look forward that we're sort of, again, leaving everything on the table, because everywhere I go in district, this is what people are asking for the legislature to spend time on: housing, childcare, energy costs, healthcare costs. There seem to be a lot of other distractions and noise up there.
I want to ask, go ahead, Representative.
Yeah, when I hear leave all options on the table, what I'm hearing is increasing fees for certain housing developments. So what I'm seeing, some of your colleagues on your side of the aisle are introducing some bills in the House
that would drive up fees for bicycles.
That would drive up fees for builders to build homes. They want affordable housing investment fees. There's some quite radical ideas to drive up the cost of housing and drive up permitting. So we're going to reject those. We're going to continue to move forward with cutting red tape. So leaving all options on the table, to me, says that we're okay with increasing taxes.
We'll let you respond there.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, there have been a number of solutions I've supported and a number I haven't. Just because something's proposed doesn't mean it's a priority. But we did work together on a bipartisan basis in the Senate last year. It was a coalition of 7 Democrats and 6 Republicans that passed most of the housing legislation that went through. But I've been working on this for almost 20 years. I'm in touch with a lot of the folks that know what's going to work, and I think making sure we're being strategic and leading from the state level remains really important, because the dichotomy of local control versus state action is a conversation that I think we're best to turn the page on and look to programs like Housing Champions, where we can work in partnership, because the state has resources that our municipalities don't. Our municipalities have visions for their towns and cities that we are not looking to control. So having those things work hand in hand is really the best way we're going to move forward.
And that does help us move to a different topic here, which is that tension between state and local. And obviously there's a third perspective that's not necessarily represented here today, which are people at the legislature who really don't like any action at the state level. We've heard Representative Turcotte use the word communistic before to describe any effort to try to overrule, in local zoning or things like that. Representative Alexander, how do you deal with that in the House as you try to get things through when when there are some people who just want nothing to come from the state?
Well, first of all, I don't think Representative Turcotte understands the definition of communism. It's like a wholehearted government control over everything you're doing. So I don't think he quite understands that. So when he said that, I was a little shocked. But I will also say that we need to have a hand-in-hand strategy. So understanding that some of the priorities that we push forward, ADUs, residential, commercial, one state, one code. A lot of those priorities were because that there was an increased control over what you can do on your own property. So when we talk about local control, I say local control is your basic property rights. The most local control is what you can do with your own property that you purchased. So we're going to continue to support those private property rights. But I would say in general, I would also turn the page. I think we've gotten a lot of stuff done. I want to see how they work out.
And quickly, Senator Perkins-Coie, to wrap us up, your thoughts on that state versus local tension?
Yeah, I mean, actually, a lot of the regulatory and zoning reforms we've worked together on, and philosophically, I do think we want to help our towns and cities grow where they want to grow. And so, again, we're looking for partnership. We're not looking to tell towns and cities how to do it. We're here to help, and we're hoping that we can all accomplish this housing goal together.
All right, some disagreements, some agreements. We'll see where it goes from here. Thank you so much for joining us on Close Up.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Adam.
Adam.
And we'll be right back with Democratic candidate for governor, John Kuiper. Stay with us.